7 King 22 priority.
7 King 22, go ahead.
I just witnessed a PIC and one of the vehicles is completely engulfed in flames. I'm at Georgia and Belpre.
Good afternoon. My name is Dinesh Patil. I'm an Assistant Chief with the Montgomery County Department of Police, and it is my honor today to serve as your Master of Ceremony. 2020 has given us both challenges and opportunities. Today marks our first virtual awards ceremony. While it is not quite the same as being together, I'm proud we are able to recognize our team and hopefully share these accomplishments with more family and friends that normally would not be able to attend in person. Every award ceremony is a wonderful opportunity to acknowledge some outstanding work performed by the men and women who serve our community each and every day. As you will hear today, our employees are hardworking, resourceful, courageous, and at times put themselves in extremely hazardous circumstances while in the performance of their duties. I would ask now that you rise for the presentation of colors by the Montgomery County Police Color Team and the singing of the national anthem by Police Officer 3 John Johnson and Sarah White.
Honor guard! On and two! Shoulder! Up! Forward! Up! Detail, halt! Detail, present, up!
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does the star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Order! Up!
Join me in prayer today. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this wonderful day that you have given to us. We're grateful in these strange times that we are in. We have a grateful heart to be able to participate to be able to acknowledge with excitement what has been accomplished here today. We ask, Lord God, that you would be with us, be with our families, with the men and women of Montgomery County Police Department as they continue to fulfill their obligation of their calling. We ask this in your precious name. Amen.
Now a message from Montgomery County Council Public Safety Committee Chair, Sidney Katz.
Hello, I'm Sidney Katz, the Montgomery County Council President, Chair of the Public Safety Committee, and the Council Member for the 3rd District. On behalf of the County Council, we congratulate all who are being honored today. We sincerely thank each of you and all of our first responders for your bravery and extraordinary commitment. We know that you put your life on the line each and every day. We not only thank you, but also your families for their sacrifices that they make as well, by sharing you with the entire community. Let me say once again the words that you never hear enough of. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce to you our Chief of Police, Marcus Jones.
Police work in the best of times is a difficult career. A rewarding career to be certain, but a difficult one because of the mental and physical stress, both expected, unexpected, and experienced on the job. These, of course, are not the best of times, as many external factors are making life more complicated as you go about your duties. There is the pandemic. The reason we are doing this ceremony virtually rather than all together in an auditorium. Police officers not only have to think about the normal risk of their job, they also must be wary of encountering or even being infected with the coronavirus. We know that some crimes continue regardless of the health situation, and we must deal with them as we always do. Thank you all for representing our department and the community. You all make me proud. Today, in every opportunity I receive, I want to talk about the men and women, particularly of our department, who run towards danger when called and not away from it. True heroes who unselfishly fight through turmoil with sometimes little to no recognition of their courage and sacrifice. We recognize a few of these heroic acts and investigations handled with perseverance, without any pause for addressing their values of the sanctity of lives and treat each victim or suspect with dignity and respect. Against that background, officers still go about their duties and still produce extraordinary acts of courage and bravery while debates occur on the value of the profession. You will hear about officers taking extraordinary measures to save a life in the middle of a complicated operation. You will hear of officers running toward a burning car to rescue the occupants. You will hear of officers interrupting a knife attack and saving the lives of the victims. These are the kinds of stories we need to hear more often, so that we can recognize the extraordinary service of our men and women rendered to the community, and so the community can see our value as well. I would like to congratulate our awardees and thank our partners that made this production possible.
Thank you, Chief Jones. We will now begin our presentation of awards. Today is a very special and rare ceremony in that we will be awarding 3 Medal of Valor awards for 2 different incidents, as well as the Supervisor of the Year awards and the Montgomery County Police Alumni Association Ethical Leadership Award. The awards will be presented in order of award category. We will begin with the presentation of our Lifesaving Awards. The Lifesaving Award is given to an employee who makes a major contribution towards saving the life of another by providing essential medical treatment or taking other appropriate action that is beyond the normal call of duty. The Lifesaving Awards today will be presented by Commander Elizabeth Hattenberg of our 1st District, Commander Sean Gagan of our 2nd District, Commander Darren Frank of our 3rd District, Commander Mark Yamada of the 4th District, Acting Commander Joe Ondurko of our 5th District, Commander Michael Ward of our 6th District, and Captain Kevin Sullivan of our Special Operations Division.
On behalf of Montgomery County Police Department, I would like to take this opportunity to commend Officer Christopher Hendricks for his heroic actions on March 29, 2020. Officer Hendricks was first to arrive on scene for the report of an adult female suffering from a heart attack. Officer Hendricks immediately sprung into action and took over the administration of CPR from the patient's husband. He continued to perform CPR until the paramedics arrived and assumed the care of the patient. The patient regained a pulse on scene and was transported to the hospital for further care. Due to the quick action of Officer Hendricks, the patient's damage from the heart attack was minimalized. Congratulations to Officer Christopher Hendricks. I am proud to present this life-saving commendation for your endeavors. You represented yourself and the department fearlessly and admirably during this crisis.
On Sunday, May 31st, 2020, at approximately 11:55 p.m., Officer Claver was dispatched to 2607 East-West Highway for the report of domestic violence. Officer Claver was the first officer on the scene and rushed inside the residence after being informed that a 52-year-old male was laying on the floor. It was later learned that the victim had attempted to intervene in a fight between his adult son and his sister when he was pushed to the ground and struck his head on the floor. Officer Claver immediately recognized that the male victim was not breathing, and he was unable to find a pulse. Officer Claver quickly began conducting chest compressions for approximately 2 minutes before members of fire rescue arrived on scene and took over vital life-saving CPR efforts. Ultimately, the victim became alert and stable once he was transported to Suburban Hospital. I am extremely proud of Officer Claver's quick actions and the life-saving measures that he took in the face of a chaotic situation that most certainly saved the victim's life. Therefore, it is my pleasure to present Officer Ludovicus Claver with a Lifesaving Award for his actions on that day. Congratulations. On October 14, 2019, officers were dispatched to the 5600 block of Sugarbush Lane for the report of a 69-year-old woman who had gone into cardiac arrest. Officers Green and Federico were the first officers on scene. As they entered the residence, they observed a family member performing CPR on the woman. The officers determined that the victim did not have a pulse, nor was she breathing. The family member was exhausted, so Officer Green took over and she began CPR. When she became fatigued, Officer Federico took over and continued to provide life-saving measures. Fire rescue arrived on scene, and eventually they were able to get a faint pulse from the victim. Fire rescue transported her to Suburban Hospital, where she was stabilized and began to breathe on her own. The fire rescue medics could not say enough about the officers' efforts, and one simply said, "CPR saves lives." Both Officer Green and Officer Federico took quick actions when faced with a life-threatening situation. Their actions are incredibly noteworthy, and I am proud of their life-saving efforts. Therefore, it is my pleasure to present Officer Lindsay Green and Officer Sarah Federico with a Life-Saving Award for their actions on that day. Congratulations.
Priority calls for service can be chaotic episodes that required skilled teamwork to resolve successfully. A stabbing with many bystanders in an apartment building with a suspect on scene is one of those calls where missing something could result in death. Had Police Officer 3 Nathan Larson not acted quickly and decisively on December 19th of 2019 to that exact scenario, a young woman may very well not be alive today. On that evening, Ida Sector officers were dispatched to the apartments on Tea Garden Circle for a stabbing that had just occurred. Officers quickly ran to the 4th floor of the building, where they encountered an unresponsive woman on the stairs. She was surrounded by a group of people, and there was blood streaming from the wound on her arm. The woman was unresponsive. The excited citizens would point the officers to the suspect, who was still inside an apartment right there. Assessing the situation, the officers advanced on the apartment to subdue the violent suspect. Police Officer Larson recognized the dire condition of the unresponsive woman and took on the role of medic. He immediately applied a tourniquet to the arm, while his shift mates effected the arrest of the man who assaulted her. The woman was quickly transported by Montgomery County Fire Rescue to Baltimore Shock Trauma. That was due to the severity of her injury. Larson would go to the hospital, where the medical staff would make a point to pull him aside and relay that his decisive and expert action likely saved the young woman's life. In recognition of his professional care that preserved the life of a county resident, we present this Lifesaving Award to Police Officer 3, Nathan Larson. It is often said that when you are a police officer, you are on duty all of the time. That even includes vacations and family gatherings. A teenager and an off-duty police officer's path would cross nearly 2,000 miles from Montgomery County, with the most precious outcome possible. In July of this year, Police Officer 3 Thomas Chaffee and his wife were in Aruba for a well-deserved vacation. TJ's wife had just entered a resort pool when she saw a body at the bottom of the pool, not moving. She called to TJ, who jumped into his role as a first responder. He immediately entered the water and retrieved the lifeless blue body. TJ immediately began to perform CPR on this teenage female. For 5 minutes, he continued the CPR and was literally able to breathe life back into this young person. So complete was his effort was that she walked to the ambulance after being revived. Following a stay in intensive care, she has fully recovered. Police Officer 3 Chaffee is a humble man, and we nearly did not know about his heroism. Fortunately, a grateful government in Aruba thought highly enough to reach out to our department. Because of TJ's immediate and expert action as a first responder, a young life was brought back from the brink and given another chance. With great pride, we present this Life-Saving Award to Police Officer 3, Thomas Chaffee.
On September 30th, 2019, at approximately 18:30 hours, an adult male was standing near a bus stop when, for unknown reasons, he collapsed. A call was dispatched to police, and Officer Aaron McMullen was the first to arrive on scene. After checking for a pulse and getting none, Officer McMullen immediately began CPR. Officer Jiwoo Jang arrived on scene and took over CPR. Shortly after this, Officer Tanya Wittenden and Officer Dustin Fritz arrived. Officer Fritz immediately applied pads for the AED. Officer Jang continued chest compressions while the AED was running its scan. Officer Wittenden then relieved Officer Jang and began chest compressions. Fire rescue then arrived on scene and took over life-saving efforts. The victim was ultimately transported to the hospital, where after several hours, doctors advised that he had regained a heartbeat and would likely survive. Due to the quick response and teamwork of Officer Aaron McMullen, Officer Jiwoo Jang, Officer Tanya Wittenden, and Officer Dustin Fritz, this victim survived. Based on these facts, I believe that the efforts of these 4 officers saved this young man's life, and I congratulate them for receiving a life-saving award for their commitment to protect the citizens of Montgomery County.
On January 29, 2020, Officers Kurt Colson and Lee Meyer were conducting a pedestrian safety detail in the area of Gunners Branch and Frederick Road when they observed 2 female victims involved in a physical altercation with a male aggressor. The altercation appeared to be escalating, and the victims were unable to get away from their attacker. Both Officer Colson and Officer Meyer physically intervened and were able to subdue the suspect. Only at this point was it learned that the man had been stabbing the victims repeatedly with a large knife. The victims were transported to the hospital with injuries to their faces, hands, and posterior. During an interview, the victims stated they were afraid they were going to be killed. Without the brave and selfless actions of these officers, this event may have had a tragic ending. With that, on behalf of the department, I would like to present Lifesaving Awards to Officer Kurt Colson and Officer Lee Meyer.
On April 8th, 2020, 6th District officers were dispatched to an assault, which was actually a stabbing, on Walker's Choice Road. Officers Amy Staunton, Laura Nichols, and Edgardo Diaz arrived on scene and located the victim suffering from multiple stab wounds. Officers Staunton and Nichols applied a tourniquet to the victim's leg to stop heavy blood loss. Officer Diaz began treating other stab wounds to the victim's other leg. Sergeants Bill Powell and Chris Fumagalli arrived on scene and, while providing additional medical assistance, located additional stab wounds to the victim's upper body. Sergeants Powell and Fumagalli recognized that the victim was having trouble breathing and subsequently sealed the upper body wounds with their own hands and then with occlusive dressing. These 5 professionals were able to draw upon their training and provide immediate life-saving medical care to the victim, which ultimately led to the victim's life being saved. Men and women like this make me proud to be one of us. People who risk their lives every day just to have the chance to do something for somebody else. They engaged in one of the noblest endeavors, the saving of another human being's life. I'm proud to award them with the Montgomery County Police Lifesaving Award.
On January 1st, 2020, New Year's Day at 1:30 in the morning, 40 patrol officers responded to the Byron Manor apartment on Georgia Avenue in Wheaton for the report of a body laying in the hallway. Officers, upon their arrival, located a 65-year-old man deceased in the hallway. The officers knocked on the door of the apartment, which the body was found in front of, at which time a male subject exited and advised that the deceased was in the apartment earlier smoking CDS and passed away. An hour after his passing, he and another occupant of the apartment dragged the dead man's body into the hallway to discard it. The other individual was now the sole occupant of the apartment and was reported to have been smoking CDS all night. Officers attempted to get the remaining occupant to exit the apartment. The subject was incoherent and refused to come out. The patrol supervisor initiated an emergency response team call-out. Upon ERT members arriving, attempts were made to elicit a response from the occupant with no success. Recognizing probable life-threatening distress that the occupant could be in, members of the SWAT team forced open the door and observed the occupant lying on the couch, naked and unresponsive. Tactical medics Kim and PO3 Jones and PO3 Woodman were immediately summoned for their assistance. All 3 officers immediately worked as a team and began life-saving measures by establishing an airway, by suctioning and inserting a nasal and oral adjunct. Next, they ventilated the subject and administered a dose of Narcan. With no changes in the subject's vitals, they administered a second dose of Narcan. Medics continued to bag ventilate the subject and began an IV. Several minutes later, just prior to transferring the subject to fire rescue personnel, the subject's respiratory drive and his vitals began to improve. The subject was transferred to fire rescue, still unconscious, and is a Priority 1 trauma patient. He was quickly transported to Holy Cross Hospital, where he received advanced care and ultimately survived. Sergeant Kim, PO3 Jones, and PO3 Woodman's actions, teamwork, and medical training, and commitment to the sanctity of life are the reasons why this individual survived this incident. It is my honor to present Sergeant Sungyoung Kim, PO3 Lyndon Jones, and PO3 Greg Woodman with a Lifesaving Award.
Thank you to our presenters and, of course, the awardees for their life-saving efforts. The next category would be the Commendation. This award is given to those employees who make a significant contribution to the mission of the department above and beyond the call of duty in the performance of their duties. The commendation will be presented by Commander Sean Gagan of our 2nd District and Acting Commander Joseph Ondurko from the 5th District.
With accommodation. In January of 2019, members of the 2nd District Community Action Team received a drug complaint from an apartment manager off Tuckerman Lane. Officer Sean Petty volunteered to handle the complaint and met with the apartment manager. From this first meeting, Officer Petty determined that the apartment was being fraudulently rented and that the individual responsible had defrauded the property management company out of thousands of dollars. Officer Petty began to slowly, but methodically, build a criminal investigation into the renter. He would discover that the individual who rented the apartment was involved in a large-scale identity theft and fraud ring. Officer Petty continued to make progress in this case as he made arrests and conducted search warrants, always keeping his focus on his main goal, which was to identify the ringleader of this very well-organized criminal enterprise. The investigation was extremely complex and would have challenged a more seasoned fraud investigator. Officer Petty collaborated closely with federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies throughout the course of this 14-month investigation. As Officer Petty and these agencies would share information, additional victims would be identified and other suspects were taken into custody. As this case continued to become more and more complex, Officer Petty did not slow down. He and his team continued to handle the community complaints as they would be assigned, but in every spare moment, Officer Petty continued to focus on this criminal investigation. In the summer of 2019, Officer Petty requested to be assigned to the Montgomery County Fraud Section so he could gain better understanding of fraud investigations and to focus his attention onto this case. It was during this temporary assignment that Officer Petty would finally be able to identify the main ringleader. Officer Petty has charged that individual with over 10 felony counts and several misdemeanor charges for his role in this identity theft and fraud scheme. Over the course of the entire 14-month investigation, Officer Petty identified 46 individuals who were victims of identity theft, 4 apartment complexes here in Montgomery County that were victims of fraud, and 6 additional apartment complexes in neighboring jurisdictions who were also victims of fraud. Officer Petty authored 19 search warrants, 22 state's attorney's subpoenas, seized 2 vehicles, seized over $8,800, recovered hundreds of items of evidence, and charged several individuals and co-conspirators with additional felonies and misdemeanors for their participation in this fraud scheme. 3 of the defendants have pled guilty in Montgomery County Circuit Court, while the others await their court dates. I am incredibly proud of the hard work and tenacity that Officer Petty displayed as he investigated this case. His dedication and sheer efforts to bring justice to the victims in this investigation exemplified the highest standards of service to the community. It is my privilege to present Officer Sean Petty with a commendation for his work all throughout this complex criminal investigation. Congratulations.
On November 11, 2019, 5th District officers responded to the 7-Eleven on Wisteria Drive in Germantown. The call initially came in as a 911 disconnect. On the call back, the caller said he was in trouble, could not talk, and to send the police fast. Officer Laura Myers was first on the scene. When she entered the 7-Eleven and approached the counter, she observed the suspect holding a large folding knife with an approximate 6-inch blade open on each end. Officer Myers retreated to the door and held the suspect at gunpoint, while instructing 7-Eleven employees and customers to the back of the store. She ordered the suspect to drop the knife and requested additional units to the scene for backup. Officer James Logan was next to arrive on the scene. Officer Myers transitioned to her taser while Officer Logan held the suspect at gunpoint. Officer Myers and Logan negotiated with the suspect to find out what he was upset about and did their best to keep the suspect calm. Officer Logan was eventually able to talk the suspect into putting the knife into his pocket, but the blades remained out. Sergeant Crest arrived on the scene and took over negotiating efforts. After about 10 to 15 minutes of negotiating, the suspect became increasingly agitated. The suspect began to walk towards the front of the store with an open knife in his pocket, and after several commands to stop walking towards the officers, Sergeant Crest began to fear the suspect was on a path to physical harm. Sergeant Crest saw an opening and rushed the subject and tackled him to the ground, where he was placed under arrest without further incident. The actions of these courageous officers created a safe scene for all who were in the 7-Eleven during this incident. This was a textbook total team effort. If any of these actions performed in this event were left undone, it would have reduced the safety, efficiency, and effectiveness of the overall operation while opening the possibility for a gravely different outcome. With that, I would like to present a Commendation Award to Sergeant Matt Kress, Officer Laura Myers, and Officer James Logan.
More examples of the great work MCPD does every day. Thank you to those officers. We will next present the Chiefs Award. The Chiefs Award is given to an employee who exemplifies the highest standards of service to the community by virtue of their diligence, dedication, and character. These presentations will be made by Captain David McBain of our Traffic Division and Acting Commander Joe Ondurko of the 5th District.
I've often described myself as a jack of all trades and master of none, and that's how I would describe Officer Jamie Derbyshire. However, I'd tweak the statement just a little. Jack of all trades, master of all. When Officer Derbyshire sets her mind to a project, she goes all in, and the end product is typically amazing. The work that she did in 2019 was really no different than years past, and I'd like to highlight just a bit of her ongoing efforts in traffic safety. She's assisted in training our new recruits in DUI enforcement. She's assisted in DUI enforcement training for the Maryland State Police. She's taught Health and Human Services classes on e-cigs and vaping. She's been a guest instructor in Marriottsville, Maryland, teaching A-RIDE to prosecutors and other police officials. She's taught DRE schools with the Maryland State Police. She's done a lot of work with the Department of Liquor Board Control in alcohol-related issues that we experience throughout the county. She's been a firm speaker and supporter of teen court. She's been a guest speaker at countless schools across the county to talk about things like alcohol usage, e-cigs, and vaping. She's presented at the Criminal Justice Coordination Committee on the need for a DUI court. Jamie oversees over 60 breath ops in Montgomery County and also the instruments that they use as part of a Maryland State Police breath op program. She oversees Maryland Highway Safety Grant funding on traffic violation issues that cause serious collisions to people on our roadways in the county. These are just a few examples of the work that Jamie does on a daily basis. This does not begin to scratch the surface on the amazing work that she's devoted to DUI and DUI enforcement for overall traffic safety. If Jamie's not teaching, she's out on the street working hard. Some of her enforcement efforts involve alcohol compliance checks for underage alcohol service to minors throughout the county. She's conducted 45 commercial motor vehicle inspections in the county. She's assisted on multiple DUI checkpoints, and she's posed as a decoy during pedestrian enforcement operations in various locations throughout the county. And finally, I'd like to talk about the impressive work Derbyshire has done in 2019 with cannabis-impaired driving. Probably the number one thing that she's devoted in her career over many years. This training was a first of its kind for law enforcement in Maryland, and quite frankly in the United States, where police officers would be exposed to individuals who had consumed a known amount of cannabis. The training she proposed to the police chief at the time was forward-thinking, which would put the department in the forefront of driving while impaired by cannabis enforcement. Officer Derbyshire worked with the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission and local dispensaries to conduct this training. It quickly gained support throughout the region, and the training caught the attention of other police agencies, prosecutors' offices from across the state. It was not long before the Highway Safety Office of Maryland participated in the training, and finally it caught the attention of the National Highway Safety Office, recognizing this training as extremely important to the safety of our highways. In 2019, Jamie trained a large number of Montgomery County police officers, Maryland State troopers, prosecutors, and other police officers from agencies all across the state of Maryland. Her efforts, without a doubt, have saved lives. For all of these efforts throughout 2019, I am proud to present Officer Jamie Derbyshire with the Chiefs Award.
In August of 2019, Officer Steve Pascali was dispatched to a call for a person sleeping in a vehicle. When he arrived on scene, he immediately recognized the person from a prior call he'd run months ago. At the time, she was pregnant and was being evicted from her family home. He quickly learned that she was still pregnant, homeless, malnourished, and in need of help. Rather than do what was just required, he went above and beyond. He contacted the Crisis Center for services, he offered referrals to community groups, and he contacted the family to try and mediate some sort of resolution, at least for the welfare of the unborn child. When that did not work, he took matters into his own hands. Knowing she was malnourished, he brought her food and water. He washed her clothes, and when he realized she was not getting any help, he brought her into his home. His family fed and clothed her, and he talked her into seeing a doctor for health issues she was having. He even let her stay in his home as he continued to coordinate with several community groups to find her a long-term solution. That same month, he received a call for a homeless person parked in a bank parking lot in Damascus. Instead of asking him to leave, Steve drove over to McDonald's and bought the man breakfast to help make a difficult situation less difficult. And in July of 2019, Officer Pascali paid nearly $200 to the extended stay hotel in Germantown because they were evicting a handicapped elderly woman. It was a hot 90-degree day, and Steve was worried the woman might suffer a heat stroke. I could describe other additional acts of kindness performed by Officer Pascali, but that would take some time. His actions should remind all of us to be a little more empathetic and compassionate in our daily lives and while working with the community. Thank you, Officer Pascali, for your efforts to make the community and the people you serve a better place. And for that, I'd like to present you with the Chiefs Award.
Once a year, we take the time to recognize a sworn and professional staff member of our department for Supervisor of the Year. This award recognizes the special challenges of being a supervisor and those who excel in this role. Today, both sworn and professional staff will be presented by Captain David McBain of the Traffic Division. For anyone who's been a supervisor, they know the challenges those assignments can have and what it takes to be exceptional. Congratulations to our winners this year.
As a supervisor in the Traffic Division Automated Traffic Enforcement Unit, Robert Hebron delivers a quality of service to the department and the citizens of Montgomery County. Mr. Hebron has high expectations for his men and women who work for him. He provides a positive work environment and demonstrates a caring attitude towards his coworkers. Mr. Hebron is committed to delivering innovative, high-quality service by exercising smart leadership, promoting teamwork, offering effective training, and treating staff and citizens with the professional respect they deserve. During 2019, Mr. Hebron has performed his supervisory responsibilities in an extraordinary manner. In addition to being an excellent ATEU field supervisor, at times has stepped up and assumed the role of program field manager. Without hesitation, he has managed district court dockets and overseen ATU operations on a much larger scale. On at least 3 occasions in 2019, Mr. Hebron assisted the Montgomery County Police Department, police officers specifically, on major crash scenes. He's provided first aid to victims, he's directed traffic, and preserved collision scenes for the arrival of police officers to investigate. Mr. Hebron is a dedicated member of the Montgomery County Police Department. He's a pleasure to work with and consistently demonstrates an exceptional work ethic resulting in a positive influence on his peers and coworkers. It is this type of attitude and work ethic that makes the Automated Traffic Enforcement Unit not only respected in Montgomery County, but in the region and the United States. For his commitment to the department, the division, and his coworkers, I am proud to present Mr. Hebron with the Supervisor of the Year Award. When you talk about a supervisor who leads by example, the name Al Diezenkowski comes to mind. Sergeant Diezenkowski in 2019 arrested 63 individuals for DUI, becoming the 4th highest officer in the Montgomery County Police Department, placing himself in the top 10% in the entire state of Maryland. Sergeant Diezenkowski supervises a very aggressive, hard-charging group of officers who make a significant impact on impaired driving in the county. In addition to his work on the road, in the classroom, and in the office managing his unit, Sergeant Diezenkowski is constantly acting as a positive role model, working hard to encourage fairness and integrity. In addition to the supervisory responsibility that Sergeant Diezenkowski has in the Alcohol Initiative section, he also oversees the Alcohol Enforcement Specialist program consisting of approximately 200 police officers. In this role, he assigns officers to various details throughout the county for saturation patrol, DUI checkpoints, channelization, and other details evenly throughout the entire county. These details require significant planning and knowledge to effectively deploy these resources. Sergeant Diezenkowski also leads the annual Holiday Task Force, where officers from each of our district stations, the Alcohol Initiative Unit, and our allied law enforcement partners dedicating 2 months to impaired driving from November to January. During the 2019 Holiday Task Force, Sergeant Diezenkowski's teams conducted 2,159 traffic stops, made 289 arrests for impaired driving, completed 20 civil citations for alcohol violations, issued 45 criminal citations, and conducted 5 DRE evaluations. Through all this supervisory work, Sergeant Diezenkowski was once again a top producer in the arrest of DUI violations. As if Sergeant Diezenkowski didn't have enough on his plate, he's also responsible for the coordination of training of our new recruits in DUI detection, AES classes, Citizens Academy classes, and other groups in the area of alcohol and impaired driving. During his tenure as lead instructor for the DUI portion of training for our recruits, there have been no recruits who have failed the training, which is an excellent accomplishment. Any supervisor that has ever supervised a specialized unit would tell you that working as a team is extremely important to success. That is no different for Sergeant Diezenkowski. He works hard to make sure everyone on his team is included and works well together. When on the road, while proactive in his own work, Sergeant Diezenkowski does not shy away from backing up other officers in his unit. Many times, Sergeant Diezenkowski will drive far distances across the county to ensure that AIU members can continue to search for impaired drivers while he assists on waiting for tow trucks. This selfless attitude and desire to help others exemplifies his leadership. Sergeant Diezenkowski should be very proud of his accomplishments, but even more important, the leadership that he displays that makes the streets in our county safer. I'm proud to present Sergeant Al Diezenkowski with the award for Supervisor of the Year. It is well deserved.
It is my distinct honor to present the Montgomery County Police Alumni Association Ethical Leadership Award. This award recognizes excellence in law enforcement and those who consistently live their principles of ethical leadership. In 2004, the Montgomery County Police Alumni Association formally established an annual Ethical Leadership Award, named in the honor of Lieutenant Colonel Warren Howes. This award established to recognize excellence in law enforcement. This award, which is established in full partnership with the Montgomery County Department of Police, formally recognizes an active member of the department for consistently living their principles of ethical leadership. I am pleased to announce the 2020 Lieutenant Colonel Warren Howes Ethical Leadership Award winner is Sergeant David Faragini of the 6th District. Sergeant Faragini was nominated by one of the most senior and well-respected officers in 6D. Sergeant Faragini has consistently made a positive impression on his officers due to his humble, professional, and friendly demeanor since his appointment to the shift over 3 years ago. He is a consummate professional who approaches everyone fairly and equitably. Sergeant Faragini has demonstrated he is trustworthy and is approachable at all times to discuss matters of concern, be it work-related or personal in nature. Two of the most interesting notes I took from the nomination of Sergeant Faragini were as follows. His nominator said this: Sergeant Faragini promotes a positive and harmonious work environment on the shift by way of his own actions, words, and demeanor, and regularly demonstrates that he appreciates when his officers handle a particular call for service or incident in an outstanding fashion. Sergeant Faragini regularly responds to higher-end and more dangerous and complicated calls for service, thus leading from the front, not from the station. Sergeant Faragini does not respond to calls in order to micromanage his officers on scene, but rather to ensure his officers have what they need to handle the call appropriately. Finally, Sergeant Faragini promotes a positive and harmonious work environment by knowing his officers and helping them develop their weaknesses and emphasizing their strengths, which is paramount in this profession. I've had the pleasure of being Sergeant Faragini's commander for a couple of years. Sergeant Faragini was always professional and willing to lead up the chain of command to ensure the best for this team. I can absolutely confirm from my experience that Sergeant Faragini is well deserving this recognition. Congratulations to Sergeant Faragini for winning the Lieutenant Colonel Warren Howes Ethical Leadership Award. Well deserved. Our final category is also our highest internal honor, the Medal of Valor. The Medal of Valor recognizes heroism and distinction in extremely hazardous circumstances. To be considered, an employee must exhibit unusual bravery in the performance of duty while facing the threat of death or serious injury. The Medal of Valor awards will be presented today by Commander Mark Yamada of the 4th District and Acting Commander Joseph Onderko of the 5th District.
On February 26, 2019 at 11:42 p.m., Montgomery County Police Officer Michael Damsky was conducting a traffic stop in the left-hand turn lane of southbound George Avenue, just south of Belpre Road in Wheaton, Maryland. Officer Damsky's attention was suddenly drawn to the sound of a speeding vehicle. He witnessed the vehicle strike a van that had stopped at a nearby red light. The van instantly became engulfed in flames, began sliding his way, leaving a trail of flames over 200 feet long, and came to a stop only a few feet away from where he had been standing. Officer Damsky calmly called out with the collision and immediately ran to the trunk of his cruiser to grab his fire extinguisher. Within seconds of the crash, Officer Damsky had forced open the driver's door and observed a female laying across the front seat amidst smoke and flames. The driver's hair was on fire, and the flames were quickly spreading to her upper body. With no regard for his own safety, Officer Damsky smothered the flames in contact with the driver, as well as the fire surrounding her in the passenger compartment, and extracted her from the vehicle, burning his hand while he was doing this. Moments later, SAT officers arrived and assisted Officer Damsky in moving the woman to a safe distance away from the van and continued to render first aid. The driver, a 51-year-old female, was semi-conscious and barely able to speak. Thinking quickly, as other officers continued first aid, Officer Damsky repositioned his cruiser to protect the scene by blocking off southbound traffic. Within 3 minutes of the crash, and just after having safely removed the woman from her burning car, the gas line erupted and the van exploded. Investigation would later reveal that the 32-year-old woman, traveling at over 100 miles an hour, intentionally crashed her vehicle into the back of the victim's van. Had Officer Damski not been at this exact place at this exact time, and had he not taken calm, swift, and decisive action to rescue the woman from her burning vehicle, she would have most certainly died in this explosion. Officer Michael Damski performed admirably in extremely hazardous conditions, displaying uncommon valor and bravery while facing serious injury and possibly death. The victim in this collision survived only through his actions. Officer Michael Damski is deserving of this Medal of Valor Award.
On February 9, 2020, officers from the Montgomery County Police Department responded to a deadly collision at the intersection of Frederick Road and Plummer Drive. Once officers arrived on the scene, they found a car engulfed in flames with 3 people trapped inside. The car had crashed into a carport, and the carport was laying dangerously on top of the vehicle. Officer Andrew Richardson was the first officer on the scene, and he removed the female from the rear of the vehicle and walked her to the sidewalk a safe distance away. Officer Richardson returned to the vehicle, and Corporal Brandy Cross helped him remove a second female from the car. The female was moved a short distance away before Officer Charles Valente stepped in and helped Officer Richardson carry the woman to safety. Corporal Cross then climbed into the burning car and tried to get the driver out of the vehicle. The driver was stuck, wedged between the steering column and the seat. Corporal Cross spoke with the driver and kept him calm. All the while, the car was on fire. Officers could hear popping and small explosions coming from the engine compartment. Officer Richardson and Officer Alex John attempted to get the driver out of the vehicle by forcing the driver's seat backwards, but were unsuccessful. Corporal Cross continued consoling the driver as fire rescue arrived and extinguished the flames. Had it not been for the heroic actions of Corporal Brandy Cross and Officer Andrew Richardson, this collision could have resulted in more deaths. Corporal Cross and Officer Richardson placed their lives in extremely hazardous conditions to save 3 lives, and because of that, you are truly deserving of the Medal of Valor Award.
Today you have heard stories of selfless acts, dedication, teamwork, tenacity, leadership, initiative, and heroism. Outstanding police work occurs each and every day in Montgomery County. While not every event gets recognized in a formal ceremony, Montgomery County residents can rest assured that they are in good hands. We are truly fortunate to have such a great team of officers and professional staff working here in Montgomery County.
Join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, our hearts are enlarged by what we have heard today. The accomplishments, the dedication of the men and women of Montgomery County Police Department. We ask, Lord, that you would continue to guide and protect as they serve. We ask, Lord, that their families be encouraged and uplifted in these challenging times. Lord, let us go forth from this day, continuing to walk the path that you have called us to walk. In your name we pray. Amen.
On behalf of Chief Marcus Jones, Assistant Chief Smith, Didone, Parker Lone, and myself, I want to thank our employees for their outstanding work and wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season.